That cold morning, no one expected an act of kindness to change everything. What started as another day on the road became a story the whole town tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we show that behind the engines and the leather, there are still human hearts. The rain had just stopped, leaving the asphalt outside the small-town police station slick and gleaming under the pale dawn light. Officer Daniel Hayes pulled his cruiser into the lot, the wipers slapping one last time against the windshield before he shut off the engine. His hands lingered on the wheel, knuckles white, as if holding on could steady the ache that had settled in his chest weeks ago. His son, Tommy, was gone. Vanished without a trace on a backpacking trip through the backwoods upstate. 13 days now, and every lead had dried up like the mud on his boots after a long shift. Daniel stepped out, the door creaking in the quiet, and straightened his uniform. The station was a squat brick building on the edge of Milford, a place where folks knew your name but whispered about your troubles. He nodded to the dispatcher inside, her eyes heavy with unspoken sympathy, and headed to his desk. Coffee steamed in a chipped mug, black, no sugar, the way he'd taken it since Tommy disappeared. But before he could sit, the front door swung open with a chime that cut through the hum of fluorescent lights. A girl stood there, no more than 10, her raincoat dripping onto the linoleum. She clutched a backpack strap like a lifeline, her dark hair matted and her cheeks flushed from the chill. Behind her the lot was empty, save for the distant rumble of a truck on the highway. Daniel's partner, Lou, glanced up from his reports, but it was Daniel who moved first, his boots echoing as he approached. "You okay, kid?" His voice was gentle, the kind honed from years of talking down scared witnesses. She looked up, eyes wide but not afraid, determined, like she'd rehearsed this 100 times in her head. "I'm looking for the officer in charge," she said, her words steady despite the shiver in her frame. "The one whose boy is missing." Daniel froze, the air thickening around him. Word spread fast in Milford, but this felt different, like she'd come with purpose. "That's me. Daniel Hayes. What's your name?" "Emma," she replied, unzipping her backpack to pull out a crumpled drawing. A boy's face, sketched in pencil, eyes laughing under a mop of brown hair. It was Tommy, uncannily so, down to the freckles across his nose. Daniel's breath caught, a hand reaching out instinctively before pulling back. "Where did you get this?" Emma glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to follow, then stepped closer. The smell of wet earth clung to her coat, mixing with the stale coffee in the air. "My uncle drew it. He knows things. He said Tommy's out there, lost in the woods near the old quarry. There's a cabin hidden by the river bend. Bad men took him, but not for long." Daniel's pulse quickened, a mix of hope and skepticism warring in his gut. The quarry was 20 miles out, a forgotten stretch of land riddled with abandoned shafts and dense pine. Search teams had combed it twice. Nothing. "Your uncle? Who's he?" She straightened, chin lifting with a quiet pride that didn't match her small stature. "Ricky, from the Iron Hawks. My Hells Angels uncle. He fixes bikes and rides with the club. They don't talk to cops, but he heard about you at the diner last night. Said the police gave up too easy." The name hit like a cold wind. The Iron Hawks, outlaws to most, ghosts on the highways with their leather cuts and rumbling Harleys. Milford tolerated them. The club owned the garage on the outskirts, kept to themselves. But rumors swirled of backroom deals and rough justice. Daniel had seen their kind roll through town. Tattooed arms, wary stares, engines growling like warnings. Society painted them as predators, heartless drifters preying on the weak. But Emma's eyes held no deception, just a child's fierce belief. Lou cleared his throat from across the room, his chair scraping. "Hayes, you can't." But Daniel knelt to Emma's level, the fluorescent buzz overhead casting shadows on his lined face. "Why would your uncle help?" The Hawks don't get involved with us." She hesitated, fingers twisting the drawing's edge, the paper crinkling softly. "Because Uncle Ricky lost his boy too, years back, drowned in the river. He says no dad should feel that empty. And Tommy, Uncle saw a sign, a bike part, dropped near the quarry fence. Rusty chain, Hawk's mark on it. He thinks whoever took Tommy knows the club, maybe crossed them." Daniel's mind raced, piecing it together. The Hawks had rivals, old grudges from road wars no one spoke of aloud. If Tommy had stumbled into that world. He stood, glancing at the map on the wall, the red pins marking dead ends. The station felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in with the weight of failure. Outside, thunder rumbled low, promising more rain. "Emma, this is serious. You tell your uncle to come in. We can—" She shook her head, backing toward the door. "He won't. But he'll find him. Told me to give you this." She pressed the drawing into his hand, her palm cool against his. Then, with a last look, part plea, part promise, she slipped out into the gray morning. Daniel watched her go, the door chime fading into silence. The drawing trembled in his grip, Tommy's smile staring back like an accusation. Lou approached, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Kid's probably spinning tales. Hawks don't play hero." But Daniel wasn't so sure. In the quiet of the station, with rain pattering against the windows, he felt the first crack in the wall he'd built around his grief. What if the monsters everyone feared held the key? What if kindness hid in the rumble of engines and the shadow of leather? He folded the paper carefully, tucking it into his pocket, and grabbed his keys. The road called, dusty and unforgiving, leading toward truths the town wasn't ready to face. The engine of his cruiser hummed to life, tires cutting through puddles as he headed toward the highway. Milford blurred in the rear view, a place of neat lawns and closed doors, where good men like him were supposed to solve everything alone. But alone hadn't brought Tommy home. As the quarry loomed in the distance, pines whispering secrets in the wind, Daniel wondered if the line between law and outlaw was as clear as he'd always believed. The air smelled of pine and possibility, heavy with the unspoken bond of fathers who knew loss too well. The quarry road twisted like a scar through the pines, gravel crunching under the cruiser's tires as Daniel pushed the speedometer higher than he should. The wipers flicked intermittently, smearing the light drizzle that had started up again, turning the world into a hazy watercolor of greens and grays. His radio crackled with static, dispatch checking in, routine chatter about a fender bender downtown. But he let it go unanswered. Focus narrowed to the drawing in his passenger seat. Tommy's face folded neat but creased from his pocket, those freckles a punch to the gut every time he glanced over. He'd driven this stretch before, during the searches. Teams in orange vests, dogs straining at leashes, their barks echoing off the sheer rock faces. Nothing but echoes and empty shafts, the kind that swallowed secrets whole. The old quarry had been shuttered decades ago, after a cave-in claimed 3 miners. Locals still crossed themselves when passing the rusted gates. But Emma's words lingered, that rusty chain with the hawk's mark. It nagged at him, a loose thread in the tapestry of dead ends. The fence came into view first, chain link sagging under ivy and thyme, a faded no trespassing sign dangling like a broken promise. Daniel killed the engine 100 yards out, the sudden silence amplifying the drip of rain from the pines. He stepped out, boots sinking into the mud, the air thick with the metallic tang of wet earth and something sharper. Oil, maybe, or exhaust long faded. His hand rested on the holster at his hip, habit more than threat, as he scanned the tree line. No movement. Just the sway of branches and the distant call of a crow. Pushing through the underbrush, he followed a faint path Emma had described. River bend, hidden cabin. Thorns snagged his uniform pants, drawing thin lines of blood he barely noticed. The river rushed nearby, swollen from the rain, its murmur a constant undercurrent to his thoughts. What was he doing out here alone? Protocol screamed for backup, for maps and warrants. But grief didn't follow rules. It pulled you into the shadows, whispering that every second counted. The cabin emerged like a ghost from the mist, weathered planks leaning against a massive oak, roof patched with corrugated tin that rattled softly in the wind. No smoke from the chimney, no lights, but fresh tire tracks scarred the mud, wide, from something heavy like a truck or bike trailer. Daniel's heart thudded, steady but insistent, as he approached the door. It hung ajar, creaking on unoiled hinges, and inside, the air was stale, laced with mildew and the faint, acrid bite of fear sweat. He drew his sidearm, the weight familiar in his palm, and nudged the door wider. The single room unfolded in dim light, filtering through cracked windows. A cot shoved against the wall, stained mattress bare, a table cluttered with empty cans and a half-eaten sandwich gone green. Chains bolted to the floor, links rusted but sturdy, the kind that could hold a kid without mercy. Signs of struggle, scuff marks on the boards, a overturned chair splintered at the legs. No blood. Thank God. But the implications hung heavy. A muffled violence that twisted his stomach. "Tommy?" The word escaped hoarse, echoing back at him. Nothing. He holstered the gun and knelt by the chains, fingers tracing the links. There, etched faintly into one, a crude hawk in flight, wings spread like a warning. Ironhawks. His mind reeled, piecing it with Emma's story. Not random abduction, then. Something tied to the club, a grudge spilling over into innocence. Outside, the crunch of gravel snapped him upright. Engines, low, throaty growls approaching from the road. Daniel slipped to the window, peering through the grime. 3 bikes crested the rise, Harleys by the look, riders in black leather cuts emblazoned with the hawk emblem. They cut the motors a respectful distance away, boots hitting dirt as they dismounted. The leader was broad-shouldered, beard-streaked gray, moving with the deliberate gait of someone who'd seen too many roads and too few answers. Ricky? He matched Emma's vague description. Tattoos snaking up his arms, eyes hidden behind aviators even in the overcast light. Daniel's instinct was to call it in, to draw the line at lawman versus outlaw, but he held back, watching as they fanned out, scanning the ground like hunters. One knelt by the tire tracks, nodding to the leader, who pulled a bandana from his pocket and wiped his brow. No weapons drawn, no aggression, just quiet purpose, the kind that spoke of shared loss rather than turf wars. He stepped out, hands visible, badge glinting on his chest. "Ricky? That you?" The men froze, hands twitching toward pockets, but the leader raised a palm, stilling them. He removed the glasses, revealing eyes lined with fatigue, the same hollow look Daniel saw in his own mirror every morning. "Officer Hayes, Emma said you'd come sniffing." His voice was gravel rough, tempered by cigarettes and silence, but there was no sneer, just weary acknowledgement. "You know my kid's missing. This place." Daniel gestured to the cabin, the chains glinting wetly. "Your marks all over it." Ricky glanced at his riders, 2 younger men, one with a scar pulling at his lip, the other fidgeting with a lighter, then back to Daniel. "Not ours. Not like that. We run parts out here, old runs from before the quarry shut. But that chain? Stolen, probably. We've got enemies who like to pin dirt on us." He paused, rain pattering on his cut like distant applause. "Emma's right about the river bend. Saw the tracks yesterday, fresh. Kid-sized prints mixed in, heading east toward the old logging trail." Daniel's throat tightened, hope flickering like a match in the wind. "Why help? Your club's got no love for badges." Ricky's gaze dropped to the mud, boots shifting. The scar-faced rider muttered something low, but Ricky shot him a look that silenced the air. "Lost my boy Caleb 5 years back. River took him. Swollen like this, no warning. Was off on a run, came home to empty. Cops said accident, closed the book quick." His voice cracked, just a hair, but enough to bridge the gap between them. Two fathers, worlds apart, bound by the same void. Hawks don't forget that ache, and if bad men crossed into our shadow, thinking we'd look away, we don't. The younger rider with the lighter stepped forward, offering a crumpled map from his saddlebag. Hand-drawn, marked with trails and a circled spot by the logging path. Cabins up there, abandoned. Saw smoke last night. Could be your boy. Daniel took it. Paper damp but legible. The gesture small but seismic. No deals, no strings, just men doing what the system couldn't. The rain picked up, drumming on leaves, washing the tension into something almost companionable. This could get messy. If you're rivals, we handle our own, Ricky cut in, gentle but firm. But you, get your son. World's got enough ghosts. As they mounted up, engines coughing to life, Daniel folded the map into his pocket beside the drawing. The rumble faded into the pines, leaving him alone with the cabin's shadows and the river's rush. For the first time in days, the ache in his chest eased. Just a fraction, replaced by a quiet resolve. Outlaws or not, these men saw the humanity in his hell, the loyalty that law often overlooked. He climbed back into the cruiser, the engine's hum a promise, heading east into the unknown. The road ahead twisted, fraught with moral shadows, but in the rear view, the quarry receded like a judgment lifted, revealing the raw edges of trust where none should exist. The logging trail snaked eastward like a vein through the heart of the forest, mud sucking at the cruiser's tires as Daniel navigated the ruts. The map from the Hawk's rider lay open on the dash, its pencil lines smudged but insistent, guiding him past fallen logs and fern-choked clearings. Rain had eased to a mist, cloaking the pines in a silvery haze, the air heavy with the scent of damp moss and decaying leaves. Every bump jolted through him, a reminder of the fragility of this lead. A child's word, an outlaw's sketch. Trust extended across lines he wasn't sure he could uncross. He'd radioed dispatch on the way, voice clipped as he reported the cabin and the tracks, downplaying the Hawk's involvement. Possible sighting near the old logging camp, he'd said, omitting the chains, the Hawk etching, the shared grief in Ricky's eyes. Lou would question it later, the department's suspicion of anything outside protocol. But for now, Daniel drove alone, the weight of his badge feeling both anchor and chain. The river paralleled the trail, its waters churning gray and relentless, whispering of Caleb's fate, of Tommy's possible fear. What if this was a trap? Outlaws playing games with a desperate father. But Ricky's pause, that crack in his voice, echoed too true to dismiss. The circled spot emerged after an hour, a cluster of derelict cabins huddled by a bend where the river widened into a shallow pool. Boarded windows stared blankly, roofs sagging under moss, the whole scene like a forgotten memory left to rot. Daniel parked behind a thicket, killing the engine to listen. Wind through the branches, water lapping stones, and then, faint, almost imagined, a clink of metal on wood. His hand went to the holster again, pulse steadying with the ritual. He moved low, boots silent on the needle-strewn ground, the mist beating on his skin like cold sweat. The first cabin yielded nothing but cobwebs and mouse droppings, the door groaning open to reveal a floor littered with shattered glass. But the second, set back against a rocky outcrop, showed signs. Fresh boot prints in the mud, larger than a child's, and a thin trail of smoke curling from a makeshift vent in the roof. Daniel's breath shallowed, the air inside carrying the tang of unwashed clothes and something sweeter, canned peaches maybe, or fear-tainted breath. He circled to the side window, glass cracked but intact, and peered through. There, in the dim interior lit by a single lantern, sat Tommy. His son, curled on a threadbare blanket, knees drawn up, face smudged with dirt but alive. God, alive. The boy's eyes were closed, chest rising in shallow rhythm, a makeshift bandage on his forehead stark against pale skin. No chains here, but a length of rope tethered his ankle to a bedpost, loose enough for small movements but unyielding. A shadow moved in the corner, a man, burly, pacing with a cigarette dangling from his lips, muttering into a phone. "Yeah, the kid's fine. Hawks'll pay up once they know it's personal." His voice was low, edged with nerves, the glow of the phone illuminating a face scarred by old fights. Daniel's world narrowed to that sight, rage coiling hot in his veins, tempered only by the need to think. Burst in now, and the man could harm Tommy before he crossed the threshold. Wait for backup, and hours lost, night falling, risks multiplying. The moral knot tightened, law demanded procedure, but fatherhood screamed action. He eased back, mind racing for a plan, when the rumble started. Distant at first, then building like thunder rolling in from the west. Engines, multiple, the Hawks. They crested the trail in formation, 4 bikes this time, including Ricky's, their pipes coughing smoke that mingled with the mist. They dismounted fluidly, no words exchanged, spreading out to flank the cabins with the quiet efficiency of men who'd handled worse than this. Ricky spotted Daniel first, nodding once, a silent pact renewed, before signaling his riders to hold position. The scarred one from earlier, lip twisting in a grim smile, pulled a tire iron from his saddlebag, not as a weapon but a tool, wrapping it softly against his palm. The phone man inside stiffened, dropping the call mid-sentence. "What the hell?" He grabbed a shotgun from the wall, rusty but loaded, and cracked the door, peering out. "Who's there? This ain't your business." Ricky stepped forward, hands open, aviators back on despite the gloom. "It is now, Jax. You think kidnapping a kid gets you leverage? That's low, even for a rat like you." His tone was even, laced with that gravel weariness, but underneath ran a current of contained fury, the kind born from protecting what little family remained. Jax laughed, bitter and short, the shotgun barrel glinting. "Hawks turned their back on me years ago. This boy's your ticket. Pay up for the old debts, or the cop's son floats like Caleb did." The name hung in the air, a deliberate barb, and Ricky's shoulders tensed, the mist swirling around him like a shroud. Daniel emerged from cover, gun drawn but low. "Drop it, Jax. It's over." The standoff crackled, 3 worlds colliding. Law, outlaw, and the desperate edge of vengeance. Jax's eyes darted, calculating. But the Hawks closed in, their presence a wall of leather and loyalty. Not for glory, but for the code Emma had hinted at. No one hurts the innocent in their shadow. A shot rang out. Not from Jax, but wild, into the air as panic seized him. Chaos erupted, riders lunging, Daniel diving toward the door, the rope snapping under frantic pulls from inside. Tommy's cry pierced the din, muffled but real, pulling Daniel through like a lifeline. He tackled Jax from the side, the shotgun skittering into the mud, fists connecting in a blur of grunts and rain-slicked struggle. The man fought dirty, elbow to Daniel's ribs, but Ricky was there, hauling Jax off with a strength forged in loss, pinning him face down as the other riders secured the scene. In the cabin, Daniel knelt by Tommy, knife from his boot slicing the rope free. "Dad?" The boy's voice was small, trembling, arms wrapping around him in a crush that broke something deep. Tears mixed with mist on Daniel's face, unspoken thanks to the shadows outside. The Hawks had bought the time, their intervention a quiet justice where badges fell short. As sirens wailed in the distance, backup finally closing in, Ricky met Daniel's gaze through the door, a nod passing between them. No words needed. The Brotherhood's compassion had bridged the divide, revealing the heart beneath the rumble. Jax was cuffed, spilling names and motives in a rush, but the real story unfolded in the silence after. Outcasts standing for a father's pain, proving that loyalty transcended badges and leather alike. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage and loyalty can travel. The mist clung to everything as the first cruiser lights pierced the gloom, red and blue strobing off the wet pines like erratic heartbeats. Daniel held Tommy close in the cabin's dim confines, the boy's small frame shaking against his chest, breaths coming in ragged hitches that mirrored the storm still brewing inside him. The rope's remnants lay coiled on the floor like a shed skin, and Daniel's fingers traced the raw welts on his son's ankle, each touch a silent apology for the days lost, the failures stacked like unpaid debts. Outside, the Hawks' riders stood sentinel, their leather cuts darkened by rain, faces etched with the quiet satisfaction of a debt settled. Not for a claim, but for the unspoken code that bound them. Jax writhed in the mud under Ricky's knee, his curses muffled by the gravel, but the fight had drained from him like water from the river pool nearby. The other riders, Scar and the one with the lighter, whose name Daniel hadn't caught, flanked him without flourish, one holding the shotgun at arm's length, the other securing Jax's wrists with zip ties from a saddlebag. No bravado, just efficiency born of roads where law was a suggestion and survival demanded precision. Sirens grew louder, tires slurring on the logging trail, and Ricky finally eased off, hauling Jax to his feet with a grip that promised no mercy if he twitched wrong. "Easy now," Ricky murmured, more to his own men than the captive, his voice a low rumble swallowed by the approaching wail. He glanced at Daniel through the open door, the nod lingering a second longer, carrying the weight of shared voids, fathers who knew the sharp edge of absence. Then, without a word, the Hawks moved as one, mounting their bikes with the fluid grace of men who'd danced this dance before. Engines snarled to life, a chorus that drowned the sirens for a heartbeat, exhaust blooming thick in the mist before they peeled away down a side path, vanishing into the underbrush like shadows reclaiming the night. Backup arrived in a skid of mud and urgency. Lou and 2 deputies spilling out, shotguns at the ready, eyes widening at the scene. "Hayes, what the hell happened?" Lou barked, his flashlight beam cutting through the haze to illuminate Tommy's pale face, then Jax's snarling one. Daniel rose slowly, one arm cradling his son, the other wiping mud from his uniform. The words came halting, pieced together around the lump in his throat, the cabin, the tracks, the confrontation. He skirted the Hawks' roll, framing it as a lucky break, anonymous tip leading to the standoff. Lou's brow furrowed, suspicion flickering like the cruiser lights, but the sight of Tommy silenced questions for now. "Get the kid to the hospital," Lou ordered, radioing for an ambulance as deputies swarmed Jax, cuffing him proper and Mirandizing through his spits. Daniel nodded, guiding Tommy toward the lead cruiser, the boy's steps unsteady, clinging to his father's sleeve. The river's rush seemed louder now, a relentless underscore to the chaos, carrying the faint echo of Caleb's name like a ghost refusing to fade. As they drove out, Tommy's head lolled against Daniel's shoulder, whispering, "They came, Dad. The men on bikes. Said they'd keep me safe till you got here." Daniel's hand tightened on the wheel, the mist blurring the trail ahead, a veil over the truths he wasn't ready to unpack. Back in Milford, the hospital lights buzzed sterile and unforgiving, a far cry from the forest's raw embrace. Tommy was whisked into exam rooms, doctors murmuring about dehydration, minor bruises, the shallow cut on his forehead from a fall during the grab. Daniel paced the linoleum corridor, the squeak of his boots echoing his frayed nerves, coffee from the vending machine bitter on his tongue. Emma's drawing, now tucked safely in his wallet, felt like a talisman against the sterile walls. Tommy's smile a beacon through the fog of relief and rage. Lou cornered him outside the room, arms crossed, the fluorescent hum overhead casting harsh shadows on his weathered face. "You gonna tell me how you found that place, Hayes? Logging trails off the grid. No way a tip gets you there solo." Daniel met his gaze, the moral weight pressing like the rain earlier, heavy and inevitable. Lie and protect the Hawks' fragile bridge. Tell and risk unraveling the quiet justice they delivered. A kid came to the station. he said finally, voice low. Emma gave me a lead, but the bikes, they showed up. Iron Hawks. Ricky's crew. Lou's eyes narrowed, the name landing like a stone in still water. Outlaws, Dan. You let them waltz in on a kidnapping? Department's gonna bury you for that. The words stung, laced with the town's ingrained distrust. Bikers as villains in leather, engines masking malice. But Daniel saw differently now, the flicker of compassion in Ricky's paws, the way his riders had held back from violence, choosing restraint over retribution. They saved him, Lou. Jax was armed, twitchy. If they hadn't flanked him. He trailed off, the what-ifs twisting like the quarry road. Word spread through the station like smoke from a tailpipe, whispers in the break room, sidelong glances at Daniel's desk. The chief called him in at dawn the next day, the office reeking of stale cigars and authority, maps of the search area pinned to the wall like accusations. Hawks, huh? Girl's uncle leads them? The chief leaned back, chair creaking, his face a mask of skepticism. We don't cozy with felons, Hayes. Jax is singing. Says he grabbed the boy to hit the club where it hurts. Old beef over a botched deal. But you, associating with them could cost your shield. Daniel stood rigid, the badge on his chest suddenly heavier, a symbol of order that had faltered when it mattered most. They didn't ask for thanks, just did what needed doing. The chief sighed, waving him out, but the warning hung. Internal review pending, questions about protocol and lines crossed. Outside, the town stirred under a clearing sky, the highway humming with early traffic, but Milford's judgment lingered thicker than fog. Bikers as pariahs, their help a stain rather than salvation. That afternoon, Daniel drove to the Hawks garage on the outskirts, the lot a patchwork of oil stains and racked Harleys, air thick with the tang of grease and welding sparks. Emma spotted him first, wiping her hands on a rag from under the hood of a chopper, her small face lighting with shy triumph. Is Tommy okay? She asked, no preamble, the same determination from the station shining through. He's home, thanks to you, and your uncle. Daniel knelt, pulling the drawing from his wallet, offering it back. She took it gently, fingers brushing his. A child's touch carrying the weight of worlds bridged. Ricky emerged from the shop, wiping sweat from his brow with a bandana, his cut slung over one shoulder. No surprise in his eyes, just quiet appraisal. Heard the boy's safe. Good. The words were simple, but the pause that followed stretched, heavy with the unsaid. The Brotherhood's code, loyalty forged in loss, stepping where society hesitated. Why risk it? Daniel asked, voice rough from lack of sleep. For a cop's kid? Ricky glanced at Emma, then back, the garage's shadows playing across his lined face. Emma's got a dad who's no better than Jax. Absent, mean when he's around. Club's her family. And you're just a man hurting. We've all been there. He extended a hand, calloused and steady, the shake brief but solid, sealing an alliance born of necessity and empathy. As Daniel drove away, the garage receding in the mirror, the sun broke through, gilding the asphalt. The ache in his chest had shifted, not gone, but shared, a burden lightened by outcasts who saw the human beneath the uniform. Milford might whisper, the department investigate, but in the quiet hum of the engine, Daniel felt the first stirrings of redemption, not in judgment, but in the raw loyalty that defied labels. The road stretched on, promising more shadows, but also the faint light of trust earned in the margins. The days blurred into a fragile normalcy after the rescue, the hospital discharge papers crisp in Daniel's glove compartment, like a fragile truce with fate. Tommy slept fitfully in his own bed that first night, the room still smelling of the pine air freshener Daniel had sprayed to chase away the shadows of the cabin. Daniel sat in the armchair by the window, watching the rise and fall of his son's chest, the moonlight filtering through curtains to paint silver edges on the boy's tousled hair. No nightmares yet, the doctor said. But Daniel knew better. The quiet tremors in Tommy's hands when he reached for a glass of water spoke volumes, a silent echo of ropes and muffled fears. Work pulled him back too soon, the station a hive of sidelong glances and clipped conversations. Lou avoided his eyes during shift change, burying himself in reports, while the chief's door stayed cracked, voices murmuring about affiliations and internal affairs. Daniel clocked in, uniform starched but conscience rumpled, the badge a reminder of lines he'd towed. Jax's interrogation had yielded threads, a low-level grudge against the Hawks from a botched part smuggling run years back, the kidnapping a desperate bid for leverage. But the department spun it as a solo act. Hawks's involvement buried under Daniel's omissions, the truth too messy for official ink. He drove the quarry loop that afternoon, habit more than need. The river's murmur a constant companion through the pines. The cabin site was taped off, yellow barriers fluttering like caution flags, but the air held the ghost of that standoff, the mist, the engines, Ricky's steady gaze. Daniel pulled over at the bend, boots crunching gravel as he walked the bank, water lapping cold against the rocks. A glint caught his eye. A small hawk pendant, silver and tarnished, half buried in the silt. He fished it out, the chain broken, emblem wings etched with care. Caleb's? The thought settled heavy, a piece of loss washed up like driftwood. Back at the garage by dusk, the lot hummed with the low whine of air tools and the scent of heated metal. Emma was there, perched on a stool, sketching on a scrap of paper. Another face, this one Ricky's, lines softened by her child's hand. She looked up as Daniel approached, ragdoll curls falling into her eyes, a smudge of grease on her cheek like war paint. "Tommy's drawing," she said simply, sliding it across the workbench. It was crude but earnest, bikes circling a boy, hawks overhead, no fear in the lines. Ricky emerged from the bay, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tattoos stark against sweat-damp skin, a faded anchor on one forearm, a name scripted below, Caleb. He wiped his hands on his jeans, the motion deliberate, eyes flicking to the pendant in Daniel's palm. "Found that, huh?" His voice was quiet, gravel underfoot, carrying the weight of rivers and regrets. No accusation, just the slow nod of recognition. Daniel held it out. "By the water. Thought it might be." He trailed off, the words sticking like mud. Ricky took it, fingers closing around the metal, a tremor so faint it might have been the evening chill. Caleb's. Lost it that day. Swelled up fast. The river took him under before I could blink. I was out on a run, chasing shadows for the club. Came home to her screaming. He jerked his chin toward Emma, who busied herself with her sketch, ears attuned, but eyes averted. The garage lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows that danced like unspoken ghosts. Daniel leaned against the workbench, the cool edge grounding him. "Emma said you lost your boy. Didn't know it was the river here." The parallel hung between them, two fathers marked by the same current, currents of grief twisting deeper than law or leather could reach. Ricky pocketed the pendant, gaze drifting to the highway where taillights streaked red in the fading light. Hawks pulled me through after. Brothers who don't ask questions, just ride till the ache dulls. Jax. He was one of us once. Turned sour when we cut ties. Debts unpaid, lines crossed. Grabbing your boy? That was his way of dragging us back in. A pause, heavy as the hum of idling engines. But we don't let innocence pay for old wars. Not anymore. The moral thread tugged tighter then, as headlights swept the lot. A black SUV, unmarked but purposeful, pulling up slow. Two men stepped out, suits crisp against the grease-stained world, badges flashing under the sodium lamps. Detectives from county, the kind who chased club whispers like hounds. "Ricky Torres?" the lead one called, voice edged with authority, notepad in hand. Word is you were at the logging site. Care to explain? Ricky's jaw set, but he didn't flinch, stepping forward with hands visible. Emma slipped behind the workbench, her small frame tensing like a coiled spring. Daniel's pulse quickened, the scene unfolding in slow motion. The suits advancing, questions sharp about alibis and involvement, the Hawks code clashing against the system's grind. We were scouting parts, Ricky said evenly. No lie, but no full truth. His eyes meeting Daniel's across the space. A silent plea to stay neutral or step in. The second detective turned to Daniel, recognition dawning. Officer Hayes, funny finding you here. Chief's got questions about your tip leading to the Hawks. Suspicion laced the words, painting Daniel as compromised, the bridge he'd built now a tightrope over judgment. Daniel straightened, the weight of choice pressing like the river's undertow. Speak up, validate the Hawks' role, and risk his career. Expose the compassion that saved Tommy, but invite scrutiny on outlaws who bent rules for right. Stay silent, and let the department's bias erode the trust, branding Ricky's help as collusion. His hand clenched at his side, knuckles whitening, the pendant's memory a quiet anchor. They followed a lead same as me, he said finally, voice steady despite the storm inside. Got there in time. That's what matters. The detectives exchanged glances, jotting notes, the air thickening with unspoken accusations. Ricky's nod was subtle, gratitude in the set of his shoulders, while Emma peeked out, her sketch forgotten. As the suits retreated to their vehicle, engines purring away into the night, the garage exhaled. A collective breath held too long. Ricky clapped Daniel's shoulder, the touch brief but brotherly, cutting through the divide. Appreciate it. Club's got your back if they push. The words lingered as Daniel walked to his cruiser, the lot's gravel crunching underfoot, neon from a distant sign flickering like a heartbeat. Inside, Tommy's drawing waited on the seat, a reminder that redemption wasn't in badges or cuts, but in the small stands, the trembling hand extended across shadows, loyalty blooming where judgment failed. The drive home wound through Milford's quiet streets, porch lights glowing soft against the dark. But Daniel's mind raced ahead to the chief's office, the inquiries looming like thunderheads. For the first time, the uniform felt less like armor and more like a veil, hiding the human threads that bound him to Ricky, to Emma, to the boy safe in his bed. The river's song faded behind, but its lesson echoed. Some currents pulled you under, others carried you toward light, if you had the courage to trust the flow. The chief's office felt smaller that morning, the walls paneled in dark wood that absorbed light like secrets, the air thick with the residue of yesterday's coffee, and the faint, acrid bite of printer ink. Daniel stood before the desk, hands clasped behind his back, the uniform's fabric pulling taut across his shoulders as if mirroring the tension coiling there. Tommy was home. Yes, curled up with a blanket fort in the living room, sketching bikes with Emma's borrowed crayons. But the cost of that miracle pressed in now, the department's gaze turning inward like a spotlight on a suspect. Chief Harlan leaned forward, elbows on the blotter, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, the lines around them deepened by years of small-town scandals. A file lay open between them. Photos from the logging site clipped to statements. Jax's mugshot, the cabin's dim interior, tire tracks leading nowhere. Hayes, this isn't adding up. You go off-grid on a tip from some kid, end up with outlaws playing cowboy, and suddenly the boy's safe. Internal Affairs is sniffing around. Says it smells like collusion. His voice was measured, but the undercurrent of disappointment cut deeper than accusation. A father's trust fraying at the edges. Daniel's jaw tightened, the faint stubble rasping under his palm as he rubbed it, buying a moment. The pendant from the river weighed in his pocket, a talisman of truths half buried. Sir, the Hawks didn't orchestrate anything. They followed the same lead. Jax was their problem too. If I'd waited for protocol, Tommy might still be out there. The words hung heavy, laced with the moral bind, defend the Brotherhood's quiet heroism, and risk the badge that defined him, downplay it, and betray the compassion that had bridged their worlds. Harlan sighed, chair creaking as he sat back, the sound echoing like a judgment deferred. "You're a good cop, Dan. But the brass sees bikers and thinks corruption. Hawks have priors, smuggling, assaults that never stuck. You vouch for them, and it's your neck." He tapped the file, pages rustling softly. "Review boards tomorrow. Keep it clean, or this town's gonna eat its own." The dismissal came with a nod, and Daniel stepped into the corridor, the fluorescent buzz overhead drilling into his skull. Lou waited by the coffee machine, mug steaming in his grip, his broad frame blocking the light from the bullpen. "Told you, Hayes. Department's got no room for gray. You think Ricky's crew cares about your shield?" Lou's tone was gruff, protective in its way, but edged with the fear of shared downfall. The cop code demanding isolation from the shadows. Daniel met his gaze, the steam from the machine curling between them like unspoken doubts. "They cared enough to show up. That's more than some leads ever did." He brushed past, the station's hum fading as he headed out, the door chime a faint echo of Emma's arrival days ago. The parking lot stretched gray under overcast skies, his cruiser a solitary shape amid the rows, engine turning over with a reluctant growl. He drove aimlessly at first, the radio off, windows cracked to let in the chill wind that carried the distant tang of exhaust from the highway. The garage pulled him like gravity, its open bays spilling the rhythmic clang of tools and the low murmur of voices. He parked at the edge, gravel popping under tires, and watched from afar. Emma darting between workbenches, handing wrenches to the scar-faced rider, now named Marco, from overheard chatter. Her laughter a bright thread in the mechanical din. Ricky was under a bike, grease-streaked arms straining as he torqued a bolt, his focus absolute, the muscles in his back shifting like weathered leather. Daniel approached slowly, boots scuffing the oil-slicked concrete to announce him. Emma spotted him first, waving a rag like a flag, her face alight. "Officer Dan. Tommy liked the drawing. Said the hawks look real." She thrust a new sketch at him. Tommy and Caleb side by side, rivers dividing but hands linking across the blue. He took it, paper crinkling in his fingers, the gesture warming the knot in his chest. "He's getting stronger. Asks about you." Ricky straightened then, wiping his hands on his jeans, the bandana around his neck damp with sweat. His eyes held that same weary appraisal, but softer now, the lines around them crinkling faintly. "Board tomorrow," Daniel said, no preamble, folding the drawing into his pocket beside the pendant. "They're painting you as the villains. Want to know if it was worth the heat." Ricky leaned against the bike frame, the metal creaking under his weight, a faint smile ghosting his lips. Not amusement, but the quiet irony of men judged by exteriors. "Worth it? Kids home. That's the only ledger that matters." He paused, glancing at Emma as she scampered off to fetch water, her small form a reminder of stakes beyond badges. "But if they push, clubs got ways. Witnesses who saw Jack solo, alibis that stick. We don't drag good men down." The offer hung there, simple and profound. A brotherhood extending beyond leather, to the frayed edges of Daniel's world. Moral tension coiled tighter. Accept the help, and deepen the entanglement, inviting more scrutiny. Refuse, and stand alone against the tide of institutional bias. Daniel's hand trembled slightly as he gripped the workbench edge, the cool metal grounding him. "Why? You barely know me." Ricky's gaze drifted to the highway, where semis rumbled past like nomadic kin. "Knew your eyes that first day at the cabin. Same hollow as mine after Caleb. Emma. She reminds me he's gone. But also that family's what you build when blood fails." His voice dropped, gravel soft, carrying the weight of rivers and roads. Hawks aren't saints. We've bent rules, paid prices, but hurting kids.
Crossing dads like us? That's the line we hold. Marco wandered over then, lighter flicking in his pocket, his scar pulling as he nodded to Daniel. Heard about the suits yesterday. If they come sniffing here, we got your back, cop or not. The words were casual, but the intent solid, a community forged in margins offering shelter to an outsider. Daniel nodded, the gesture small but seismic, the isolation of his badge cracking further. As he turned to leave, a low rumble built from the road, another bike approaching, sleek and black, rider pulling in with a nod to Ricky. Whispers followed. A rival scout, word of Jax's arrest stirring old grudges. Tension rippled through the garage, tools pausing mid-swing, but Ricky waved them off, his stance unyielding. "Stay clear," he murmured to Daniel, eyes flicking to the newcomer. "Some debts settle quiet." Daniel lingered a moment, the air thickening with unspoken warnings, then slipped to his cruiser. The engine's hum carried him away, but the garage's lights lingered in the rear view, a beacon against the gathering clouds. Home waited, Tommy's laughter faint through the walls, but the board loomed, a confrontation of loyalties where compassion clashed with convention. In the quiet of the drive, Daniel felt the evolution stir, from solitary lawman to something more, bound by the raw empathy of outcasts, redemption whispering in the spaces between judgment and grace. The evening settled heavy, rain tapping the roof like impatient fingers, as Daniel sat at the kitchen table, Tommy dozing on the couch nearby, a half-eaten sandwich forgotten on his plate. The phone buzzed. Lou, voice tight. "Chief's pulling strings. Tomorrow's not just a chat, it's a hearing. Hawk's names are on the table." Daniel's grip tightened on the receiver, the plastic creaking, moral crossroads sharpening into focus. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Daniel Hayes reach more people who still believe in humanity. The rain drummed a relentless rhythm on the kitchen window, blurring the streetlights into hazy orbs that cast wavering shadows across the linoleum. Daniel set the phone down slowly, the click echoing in the quiet house like a gavel falling too soon. Tommy stirred on the couch, murmuring something incoherent, his small hand clutching the edge of the blanket, as if anchoring himself against unseen currents. Daniel crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling to smooth the boy's hair, the strands soft and warm under his calloused fingers. The touch lingered, a fragile tether to the life he'd nearly lost, but the chief's words coiled tighter in his gut. Collusion, affiliations, the badge hanging by a thread woven from outlaw threads. Sleep evaded him that night, the clock's tick marking hours in the armchair, rain easing to a patter that mirrored his fraying resolve. Dawn crept in gray and unforgiving, the sky a slate roof over Milford's rooftops. He dressed in his crispest uniform, the fabric stiff against his skin, badge polished to a gleam that felt more accusation than honor. Tommy woke with the smell of toast wafting from the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the bruise on his forehead fading to a faint purple shadow. "You going to work, Dad?" The question was innocent, laced with the child's unscarred faith, but it twisted the knife deeper. "Yeah, buddy, but I'll be back soon." Daniel forced a smile, ruffling Tommy's hair before heading out, the door's latch clicking shut, like a decision sealed. The cruiser waited in the driveway, dew beating on the hood, engine humming to life with a low growl that echoed the tension thrumming through him. The drive to the station wound past familiar landmarks. The diner with its neon sign flickering awake, the quarry road veiled in mist. But today they loomed like witnesses, silent judges to the bridges he'd burned. The hearing room was a converted conference space at the county annex, walls paneled in faux wood that smelled of polish and pretense, chairs arranged in a semicircle like a tribunal. Daniel entered alone, the door whispering shut behind him, the air thick with the hum of an air conditioner straining against the morning chill.
Chief Harlan sat at the head, flanked by 2 internal affairs suits. Crisp shirts, notepads poised, faces etched with the impartiality of men who'd never chased shadows through pines. Lou hovered in the back, arms crossed, his presence a reluctant anchor. No jury, just questions, but the weight pressed like a full courtroom. "Hayes," Harlan began, voice gravelly from too many smokes, gesturing to a seat. "Sit, let's get this straight." Daniel complied, the chair's vinyl creaking under him, hands folding in his lap to still the faint tremble. The lead suit, a wiry man named Kessler with eyes like chipped flint, slid a folder across the table. Statements, maps, Jax's confession transcribed in blocky font. "Your son's rescue. Commendable. But the Iron Hawk's involvement? Witnesses place their bikes at the scene. Care to explain how a tip from a club affiliate leads you off protocol into the woods?" Daniel's throat tightened, the words forming slow, measured, each one a step on the tightrope. "Emma, the girl, came to the station, gave a drawing, a location. I followed it. The Hawks showed up independently. Jax had a grudge against them. They had skin in the game. The lie by omission tasted bitter, like the station coffee gone cold, but the truth of Ricky's map, the flanking maneuver, the shared nod in the mist, would drag them all under. Kessler's pen scratched, the sound amplified in the hush, while Harlan's gaze bored in, searching for cracks. "And your visit to their garage?" The second suit, a woman with a severe bun and voice like tempered steel, leaned forward. "Post-rescue, multiple sightings, building a rapport with known felons?" The accusation landed soft but sharp, painting Daniel as compromised, the cop corrupted by leather and loyalty. His mind flashed to the workbench, Emma's sketch, Ricky's steady hand, the human pulse beneath the rumors society clung to. Isolation clawed at him, the room's walls closing like the quarry shafts, but compassion stirred deeper, a quiet fire kindled by outcasts who'd seen his pain when badges turned away. Before he could respond, the door swung open with a pneumatic hiss, admitting a figure that shifted the air like a sudden gust. Ricky, alone, no cut, just jeans and a faded flannel that hung loose on his broad frame. His boots tracked faint gravel across the threshold, the scent of engine oil clinging to him like a second skin. The room froze, Harlan's jaw slackening, Kessler's pen halting mid-stroke. "Torres," the chief barked, rising halfway. "This is a closed hearing. You got no business?" "Got every business," Ricky cut in. Voice low and even, the gravel timbre carrying no threat, just unyielding purpose. He met Daniel's eyes first, a flicker of solidarity passing unspoken, then addressed the panel. "Heard about the heat, came to set it straight." He pulled a chair without invitation, sitting with deliberate calm, hands open on the table. Calluses scarred from wrenches and roads, no weapon in sight. Emma's influence, perhaps, or the club's code, stand for your own, even across lines. Kessler recovered first, notepad flipping open. "Iron Hawks. Records longer than my arm. Smuggling, assaults. You expect us to believe your presence at the logging site was coincidence?" Ricky's gaze didn't waver, the lines around his eyes deepening with the weight of truths he'd carried too long. "Not coincidence. Jax was ours once, crossed lines, thought grabbing a kid would pull us back in. We don't roll that way. Found the cabin, saw the tracks, followed him. Hayes got there same time. We flanked, he took the collar. Simple." The woman's suit arched a brow, skepticism etching her features. "And why help a cop? Your club's no fan of law." Ricky paused, the silence stretching thin, rain pattering against the window like hesitant applause. His fingers drummed once, a soft tap on the wood, betraying the storm beneath. "Lost my son. River here, years back. Hayes. I saw the same empty in him. Emma pushed me. Girls got heart bigger than the highway. We protect our own, and that morning, he was. The revelation hung, raw and unadorned, the room's hum fading to the rhythm of breaths held. Harlan shifted, discomfort rippling across his face, the first crack in the institutional armor. Daniel's chest tightened, emotion swelling, a trembling hand unclenching in his lap, the isolation fracturing under the weight of this man's quiet stand. No grand speech, just the truth of shared grief, the Brotherhood's compassion spilling into the light where judgment had ruled. Kessler pressed, voice sharpening. This changes nothing. Associations like yours taint the department. But Ricky leaned in, eyes locking on the suit. Taint. We saved that boy when your searches came up dry. Call it what you want, outlaw, felon, but we got there. Question is, you gonna punish the man who brought his son home? The words landed like a rumble fading into silence, the panel exchanging glances, the moral suspense coiling tighter. Harlan cleared his throat, closing the folder with a soft thud. Enough for now. Hayes, stand down pending review. Torres, appreciate the clarity, but stay out of our lanes. Ricky rose, nodding once to Daniel, a gesture heavy with unspoken alliance, before slipping out, the door's hiss sealing the moment like a vow. Alone again, Daniel felt the shift. From solitary defender to part of something larger, redemption glinting in the rain-streaked window, loyalty's quiet hum drowning the accusations. As he left the annex, the sky breaking to slivers of blue, his phone buzzed. Emma. Text simple. Uncle says hold the line. The words warmed the chill, a small act bridging worlds. But outside, a black truck idled across the lot, engine low, a shadowed figure watching. Rivals, perhaps, Jax's arrest stirring the pot. Tension simmered, the road ahead shadowed, but Daniel climbed into the cruiser, resolve hardening like asphalt under sun. The hearing had exposed fractures, but also the heart beneath. Compassion's slow burn, promising justice in the margins where law alone faltered. The cruiser cut through the thinning mist, tires hissing on wet asphalt as Daniel gripped the wheel, the annex shrinking in the rear view like a bad dream dissolving under daylight. His pulse still thrummed from the hearing, Ricky's gravel voice echoing in his ears, a stand made not for glory, but for the quiet bond of fathers who'd stared into the same abyss. The phone's text from Emma burned in his pocket, a small flame against the chill of uncertainty. Hold the line. But lines blurred now, law and loyalty twisting like the river that had claimed Caleb, threatening to pull everything under. He detoured toward the garage, the pull instinctive, the highway's hum a low underscore to his thoughts. Milford unfolded in glimpses, neat houses with curtains twitching, the diner where whispers had started it all, neon sign buzzing faintly even in daylight. The department's review loomed like storm clouds, Kessler's sharp eyes promising scrutiny, but Ricky's intervention had shifted the ground, exposing the human cracks in the suit's armor. Daniel's hand trembled on the gear shift, a delayed reaction to the weight lifted, and the new one settling. Gratitude laced with fear. For what if the rivals Jax had stirred came calling? The garage lot sprawled under a sky fracturing into blue, Harleys lined like silent sentinels, their chrome dulled by recent rain. Tools clanged rhythmically from the bays, the air thick with oil and the faint sizzle of a welder's torch. Emma was outside, perched on an overturned crate, kicking her heels against the wood, a pencil tucked behind her ear like a badge of her own. She looked up as Daniel parked, her face breaking into a grin that chased shadows from the corners. Uncle said you'd come. Tommy okay. Daniel stepped out, the gravel crunching soft under his boots, and knelt to her level, the scent of pine soap clinging to her from some recent wash. He's drawing more hawks. Says they're guardians. He pulled her latest sketch from his pocket, the one of linked hands across the river, and handed it back. Her fingers brushed his, small but steady, a child's faith anchoring the man who'd nearly broken. Ricky emerged from the shop, wiping arc-light sparks from his flannel, the pendant now strung on a new chain around his neck, glinting faintly. His eyes held that post-storm calm, but tension lined his shoulders, the morning's boldness tempered by reality's closing in. Hearing go south? No judgment, just the directness of men who'd shared too much to mince words. Not yet. You're showing up. Bought time. Daniel straightened, glancing at the road where a black truck had idled earlier, now gone but its echo lingering. But Jax's crew. Words out. You stirring the pot? Ricky's jaw set, a flicker of contained rage crossing his features, quickly schooled into resolve. He nodded toward the bays where Marco and the lighter flicking rider, Jace, Daniel had learned, worked on a frame, their movements deliberate, ears attuned. Pot's been boiling since Jax turned rat. Arrest hit the wires last night. Rivals think it's weakness, might test us. He paused, rain from the eaves dripping steady nearby, punctuating the quiet. Emma's dad showed up too. Heard about the hearing, wants her back. Says the club's no place for family. The words landed like a cold gust, the moral suspense tightening. Emma, the spark of it all, now a pawn in fractures deeper than abductions. Daniel's chest ached, seeing her small form swing her legs oblivious, the drawing clutched like a shield. She choose this? You? Ricky's gaze softened, drifting to her, the pendant rising with his breath. Chose us after he left her bruised one too many times. Club's got rules, no kids in the fire. But she's kin, blood or not. A shadow crossed his face, deeper than club wars, the late revelation unfolding in the hitch of his voice. Caleb. He drew like her, sketched bikes, rivers, always the hawks watching over. Day he drowned. I was late from a run, chasing a deal gone bad, same as Jax's grudge. Promised her mom I'd protect him. Failed. Emma. She's my second chance, keeping that promise quiet. Daniel's breath caught, the pieces aligning. Ricky's help not just for a cop's son, but redemption woven from his own unraveling. A veteran of roads and regrets, the tough exterior cracking to reveal a man mourning in silence. The brotherhood wasn't brutality masked. It was the family that caught you when rivers rose, loyalty a hum beneath the roar. Emotion swelled, a long stare passing between them, hands steadying on the crate's edge, the tremble of shared vulnerability. But tension escalated then, a low rumble building from the highway. Not friendly pipes, but the growl of multiple engines, deliberate and closing. 3 bikes crested the rise, unmarked but aggressive, riders in dark leathers without emblems, faces obscured by helmets. They pulled into the lot slow, kicking stands down with metallic clangs that silenced the tools inside. Marco stepped out, tire iron in hand, Jace flicking his lighter once, flame dancing like a warning. Emma froze, pencil dropping, her wide eyes seeking Ricky. Stay back, Ricky murmured to her, positioning himself forward, Daniel at his flank unbidden, hand hovering near his holster. The lead rival dismounted, helmet off revealing a face pocked with old scars, eyes cold as quarry stone. Torres. Jax sends regrets. Says you owe for the mess. Kidnapping was message. This is collection. His voice was flat, edged with the threat of retaliation, the air thickening with the scent of exhaust and impending storm. Daniel's pulse raced, the standoff a powder keg. Intervene as cop and shatter the fragile peace. Stand with Ricky and cross into outlaw shadows fully. Back off, he said, voice low but firm, badge glinting. Jax is done. Department's watching. The rival laughed, short and hollow, but Ricky's hand raised, stilling the air. No debts here, Ricky replied, the words measured, compassion threading through the steel. Walk away. For the kids. He glanced at Emma, then Tommy's ghost in Daniel's mind. the gesture a bridge extended. The rivals hesitated, engines idling like held breaths, the moral conflict hanging, rage versus restraint, old wars versus new mercy. One shifted, hand twitching toward a pocket, but Jace's lighter sparked again, the flame catching the sun, a small light in the standoff. The lead rival scanned them, cops and club united, and spat into the gravel. "This ain't over." They mounted up, pipes roaring as they peeled away, dust swirling in their wake, tension easing like rain after thunder. Emma ran to Ricky then, arms wrapping his leg, tears silent on her cheeks. Daniel knelt beside them, a hand on her shoulder, the circle closing. In that moment, redemption bloomed. Not in victory, but in the quiet stand, humanity revealed behind leather and law. The review cleared Daniel days later. Harlan's nod grudging but final, the suits finding no taint, only results. Milford whispered less, the story fading into diner lore, but the bond endured. Quiet rides to the river, sketches shared, fathers healing in the margins. Loyalty's hum echoed on, a reminder that strength lay not in judgment, but in the courage to protect what mattered, engines and hearts beating as one. In the end, the river flowed on, carrying ghosts to peace, while the hawks soared watchful overhead, wings of compassion spanning divides no storm could break. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching the case of Daniel Hayes and the Iron Hawks. See you in the next one.